maybe we need to take that one up offline. My sense is not the conclusion.
Any other questions?
Just one there for Arabella. In your introduction, Arabella, you referred briefly to option number 3, which is shelving of Brexit. And even here now we use phrases like if it comes to pass and all that. So we're all holding on to this glimmer of hope that it might go away. I presume on the ground in the UK there's no real way that it's going to happen. This late stage.
I hate to tell you this, but there is a real reason why nobody actually is talking about, I mean, nobody genuinely wants a second referendum, because they know that the answer would be probably the same as the first, or maybe if it flipped the other way, that the margin would be as narrow, in which case there's then that argument of why is my 52% better than your 52%, you know, and no, I think the parties have done their numbers, and they really don't want to. None of them really want to, even though some of them are calling for it politically to upset other people. But nobody actually wants it. And the truth is, no, you hear people speaking very passionately on both sides, and I have never understood there to be a massive majority in favour of having a second referendum or reversing the decision. I think if it looked like there was, then everybody would cling on to that.
We're all a little sad after that.
You should have just lied to us. So we're going to have Ian now, who is our council board member. So the STEP Irish branch is represented at the moment by sort of some UK representatives, one of whom is Ian, and Ian is going to talk about sort of what STEP's been doing and talk a little bit about our Congress now. So we're going to have that before lunch as opposed to afterwards. So we're going to do that now. So thanks very much, Ian.
No Brexit questions. Well, thank you, Gráinne, for allowing me to go before lunch, because I'm going to have to be away this afternoon. But this is really just an update. I sit on STEP board, and it's really just to explain some. I know that sometimes people wonder what do they do. Well, we do work. We do try and take the society forward, and this is just really an update as to the things that have been going on. So I think we're all in the professions facing quite a challenging time. Obviously, we've talked a lot about regulation this morning, the whole transparency agenda, CRS, FATCA, etc. And the impact that has on increasing costs for running a practice, but also those very niche issues. Where does GDPR against transparency fit? That's a huge issue to work out that dividing line. Also, legal professional privilege. Where does that cut across transparency? And those issues are ones which are just, you can see them coming through the court system in terms of judicial decisions, but there will be a lot more of those. And I think certainly from STEP's perspective, that is something that we need to be on top of, and then help practicing professionals to deal with those issues, some of which we've spoken of this morning. In terms of the technological change, again, that is another disruptor, I think, for professionals. In another incarnation, I've seen the artificial intelligence, I've seen it working in terms of smart contracts. I don't know if any of you have read the Deloitte report saying that in the UK that's going to lead that roughly 85,000 legal jobs will be lost through that. I think that's a bit pessimistic. I think all that is going to happen is a reprocessing of the way that we do things. You've got to remember that there has been a huge data revolution. 80% of the data which we use is still unstructured, and frankly, we need to find a way of structuring that data in the longer term. And that technological change as professionals, if we are able to capture it correctly, it is something which should work to our advantage. And then we have demographic change. The judge this morning said about getting older. I'm conscious about getting older, for your grey hairs. But that has real life issues in terms of capacity issues, but also global mobility and that private international law, which probably is something, certainly in the earlier parts of my professional career, would have been less prevalent. All of that reduces down to an increased need for knowledge and to help people to deal with those issues. So, on the education front, what is, oops, sorry, what did I say about technology? STEP, helping people to adapt. There is definitely that agenda to help people to adapt to these challenges. So publications, I think we all know that, the online blog, all of that stuff I personally find really helpful. The courses which are focused on the issues that people want to hear about in practice, again something which is vital for all of us. But also, and Oreg has mentioned this, the policy agenda. One of the big issues for the board is to actually, I think STEP is on a global platform, superbly well placed to actually educate the population and particularly regulators as to the issues which we actually need to face. That pendulum has swung too far the other way, so we need to try and rebalance it. And I know I gave evidence to the Treasury Subcommittee in terms of trusts, and the one thing that I took away from it was the massive misconceptions that they had. They just have that Daily Mail headline about wealthy people structuring their assets within a trust concept. But when you get them into the dialogue of commercial trusts, pensions, all of the good elements of trusts, protection of vulnerable adults, all of those things, you begin to have a redress of that balance. And that is something which obviously applies locally, but is something which we need to do across the globe. In terms of the employer partnership program, I don't know how many people here have actually come across that, but it was launched in 2016. There are now 70 plus employers in 22 jurisdictions, and really is a genuine partnership between those organisations and STEP to try and build a platform which helps develop their own professionals. I've experienced of it in practice. It works really well. It's a great attractor of new employees, but it's also something which the firm can use as a way of making sure that you've got a uniform practice base of its professionals, so that everyone is operating to the same understanding. And I think increasingly, if you get back to the idea of the challenges that we face in terms of risk management, knowing that your team have that uniform knowledge is hugely advantageous. Looking at the education offerings in 2019, launching the Advanced Certificate in Theory of Family Business and Governance, and indeed the practice of dealing with family businesses. Two, I think, courses which will be hugely attractive. In terms of private wealth advising, this is already an existing course. It's taught through classes at Oxford, but it's being rolled out in Hong Kong and Singapore. So again, something which is really reacting to increased demand. And then introduction of an advanced certificate in the principles of international taxation, compliance, and AML stuff that Oreg was talking about, and dealing with some of those very tricky issues that practitioners have to face. The last one I want to mention is the beginning of a new look for the STEP education program, a modular approach. Frankly, I always found the courses to be a little bit restrictive. So the modular approach which we're moving towards from 2020 onwards will be one exam to be chosen from trust estate type topics, one exam which has to have tax compliance or AML or some other compliance issue attached to it, and then two optional subjects. So I think it makes it much more attractive to people to actually structure their own qualification. And that fits very well into the employers program, because in the dialogue that we've had with employers, they want to have a say in terms of the process which effectively in most cases they're paying for. So I think the introduction of that certificate as a core of the modular system going forward is something which will be hugely attractive. We currently have 4,000 practitioners. That's 25% of the membership, global membership of STEP. which are involved in taking courses. But my plea to everyone in the room is to join that ship, because we all work at this on a voluntary basis, but we do need new blood. And one of the campaigns that the board is trying to engender for the next couple of years is actually to roll STEP out to a wider audience and get more people involved, so that as the older of us, and I'm looking at Porrigan as well, as the older of us fall off our respective perches, there is new blood to come on board. So that is a personal plea and a plea from the board. So, and it's particularly around the concepts that we've talked about today, getting people involved, having the debates around if there is Brexit, how's that going to work? It's all of that stuff that I think needs to be proactively managed. STEP directory online, I'm sure you're all aware of it, but it is something which, well, to be frank, the costs of printing the paper version that we all got and probably never even opened was astronomical. The online one was meant to be much more user-friendly, gives you easy updates, and also provides a much better search function, either by person, firm, branch, or jurisdiction. So I hope that everyone likes it. And finally, how to join STEP. This also has been streamlined, because again, it was very cumbersome. So the first route is the exam route. Accumulate 240 credits through completing qualifications and demonstrating relevant professional experience. That is tied back into that modular approach. So in essence, it will be 4 courses, 2 of which will be obligatory, 2 of which you've got options, but it will provide a platform on which to gain access to the TEP qualification. The essay route. If you're already qualified, to demonstrate your experience by submitting 3 essays of approximately 5,000 words. Now, that is still a very popular route to membership, because it avoids, again, people like Corrigan me having to do exams. But it is something which, again, is streamlined. There's a committee who looks at the quality of the essays across the board to provide uniformity. And finally, the expertise route, which is definitely for Corrigan me. People who have a minimum years of 10 years senior experience and can go through that route. The point is that it has been there's a much greater streamline to the process than there has been. And there's been a lot of work done by team at HQ to make sure that it is as user-friendly for people as possible. The one final thing that I want to say is obviously about the Congress. There was a lot of discussion at board around Congress. I, for obvious reasons, and not unconnected to Brexit, thought that it would be a great opportunity to bring it to Dublin. Obviously, I'm slightly biased. But it is very much a global Congress. So to that extent, there is a slight tension between trying to make it sort of thought leadership process and to make it something which is relevant to practitioners in the jurisdiction. So the approach that we're going to take is certainly to have a number of those thought leadership type lectures, but to hand over to the special interest groups to come up with themes which they want to do and focus on in terms of some of the breakout sessions and some of the other learning, so that it's made much more tangible and relevant. So it will to that extent operate at 2 levels. That's the approach that was taken in Vancouver last year. It seemed to work really well, and it's something which will be adopted when the Congress comes to Dublin in July next year. But it is something which, if there is a particular topic or a theme which you think is relevant, I have to say we have embargoed Brexit, but if there is a topic or a theme which you think is relevant, do please feed it back through Gráinne and the committee, and then we can take that on board in terms of the planning session. But I make a plea that be there, because I've been to 4 now, and they're really good congresses, and that I find them really helpful, both in terms of lifting people up from just thinking of what's on your desk, but also then in terms of what is on your desk, providing some real know-how in terms of dealing with those practical and difficult issues, particularly, as I say, with the global population and many more sort of private international type law issues coming to the So thank you all very much. I will see you next July.
Thank you very much, Stephen. A couple of our speakers will be leaving us at lunchtime, so I just want to thank them for their time today, and I think we'll now go have lunch in the restaurant, so thanks very much.